Imagine, for a moment, sitting in complete stillness, your eyes closed, your mind quiet yet aware, drifting gently through your own thoughts, memories, and sensations. You feel yourself, but do you know why? Do you truly understand the mechanics behind this awareness, the phenomenon we call consciousness, that intangible, ineffable part of you that experiences the world, that perceives light, sound, emotion, and thought itself? Now consider the startling possibility that the secret to this awareness may not lie solely within neurons or brain cells, nor in the complexity of electrochemical signals that pulse through your body, but instead may extend to the very quantum fabric of reality, where particles are waves and waves are possibilities, and the universe itself is far stranger than classical intuition allows. In this quiet, one-minute moment of reflection, we invite you to step into a frontier where physics and philosophy meet, a frontier where the foundations of quantum mechanics brush against the architecture of consciousness, and where the questions themselves are more profound than any immediate answer. In this journey, we will explore whether your awareness is simply an emergent phenomenon, a byproduct of trillions of neurons firing, or whether something deeper is at play, a subtle layer of reality encoded in the behaviors of the smallest building blocks of the universe. But before we go further, take a moment to ground yourself. Breathe in, let your mind settle, and recognize that the questions we are about to examine do not have quick answers. They are not puzzles to be solved in a minute or two. They are open invitations to contemplate the mechanics of existence itself, and in that contemplation you may find your perception of reality subtly shifting. As we begin, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, like this video if you appreciate this deep, calm exploration, and leave a comment telling us which part of the country you're watching from, so we can connect with curious minds across the United States as we embark on this journey together. At the heart of this exploration is a profound tension between the macroscopic world, the world we can touch, measure, and experience directly, and the microscopic world, where quantum mechanics reigns with rules that defy common sense. Electrons do not travel like tiny balls, they exist as clouds of probability. Photons can be entangled across vast distances, affecting each other instantaneously in ways that challenge our notions of space and time. Particles can tunnel through barriers, exist in superpositions, and collapse into a definite state only when observed. These are not abstract curiosities. These are the rules that govern the foundation of reality itself. And some theorists propose that the mind, consciousness, and subjective experience may somehow be sensitive to, or even emerge from, these quantum processes. It is a controversial notion, yet it is one that invites deep contemplation because, if true, it could reshape our understanding of life, mind, and the universe. But to even begin grasping this possibility, we must first familiarize ourselves with the terrain. We start with the neuron, the basic functional unit of the brain, and its intricate dance of ions and electrical signals. Each neuron is a tiny chemical factory, exchanging sodium and potassium ions across membranes, opening and closing channels in a precisely timed sequence. Electrical potentials propagate along axons, neurotransmitters release at synapses, and signals traverse trillions of connections in a network so complex that mapping it fully remains one of science's greatest challenges. Classical neuroscience explains much of thought, sensation, and reflex, yet some researchers argue that these processes, no matter how complex, might not fully account for subjective experience. The raw sensation of what it is like to see red, to feel joy, or to think a thought. This is the famous, hard problem of consciousness, first articulated by philosopher David Chalmers. Why does the activity of neurons, organized in elaborate networks, give rise to experience at all? And could quantum mechanics, operating at a scale so small that even trillions of neurons seem large by comparison, hold part of the answer? To explore this, we must consider the strange properties of quantum systems. In the classical world, a particle exists in one place at a time. But in the quantum domain, particles can exist in superpositions, multiple possible states at once, until they are measured or observed, at which point the wave function collapses into a definite state. This phenomenon underpins technologies such as quantum computing, which manipulates superpositions to perform calculations that would take classical computer zones. Now, imagine a system within the brain, perhaps microtubules inside neurons, maintaining coherence long enough to interact with these quantum states. Could these minuscule structures, vibrating or entangling in subtle ways, form a substrate for consciousness that is richer than mere classical information processing? Some theoretical physicists and neuroscientists, most famously Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, have proposed such models, suggesting that the quantum dynamics of microtubules may play a role in orchestrating conscious experience, offering a bridge between physics and mind. Critics argue that the brain is too warm, wet, and noisy for delicate quantum states to persist, yet experiments in quantum biology, including studies of photosynthesis and bird navigation, hint that nature may indeed exploit quantum phenomena even in complex warm systems. If such mechanisms exist, they could imply that consciousness is woven not only from the architecture of neurons and the chemistry of synapses, but also from the very quantum fabric of reality, and that our subjective awareness is a dynamic interplay between classical and quantum information. As we contemplate this, it is important to remain both curious and cautious. Quantum consciousness, as it is often called, is a frontier of scientific thought that has yet to be confirmed by empirical evidence. Many interpretations of quantum mechanics, from the Copenhagen interpretation to many worlds and objective collapse models, have profound philosophical implications for the nature of observation, measurement, and reality itself. If consciousness interacts with quantum states, could it influence physical reality in subtle ways? Could subjective awareness play a causal role in the collapse of wave functions, or is it merely an emergent phenomenon riding atop classical neurobiology? These are questions at the edge of science, where mathematics meets philosophy, and where careful reasoning is essential to separate speculation from meaningful inquiry. And yet, even as we explore theoretical possibilities, we find ourselves marveling at the implications. If our awareness is entangled, even in part, with the quantum world, then each moment of perception is a collaboration between our nervous system and the fundamental probabilistic tapestry of the universe. The self may not be an isolated island of experience, but a node in a vast web of quantum and classical interactions stretching from the subatomic to the cosmic. Beyond the mechanics, there are practical reflections to consider. Consciousness, if partly quantum, could explain aspects of cognition that have long puzzled scientists: the sudden insight of intuition, the emergence of creative thought, and the seamless integration of information across distributed neural networks. These may be emergent signatures of quantum processes guiding or amplifying classical computation, not unlike a quantum computer accelerating certain calculations. Moreover, this lens invites profound questions about identity, free will, and the continuity of experience. If quantum events influence thought, then each decision may be probabilistic in subtle ways, shaped by the same randomness that governs electron spins and photon polarization. The boundaries between determinism and free choice become nuanced, echoing deep philosophical debates from centuries past but now grounded in the language of physics. And yet, despite these heady possibilities, one must remember that quantum consciousness is a hypothesis, a fascinating framework, not a confirmed theory. Experimental verification remains extremely difficult. Neurons are large, complex, and decohere rapidly compared to isolated quantum systems studied in laboratories. Still, by studying microtubules, entangled ions, and subtle bioelectrical phenomena, researchers hope to probe whether the brain harnesses quantum mechanics in meaningful ways. Even if these experiments ultimately refute the idea, the exercise illuminates fundamental truths about consciousness: that it is extraordinarily complex, astonishingly rich, and deeply mysterious, and that the questions themselves drive innovation, inquiry, and a richer understanding of the mind. So, as we begin this journey, let us reflect on the intertwined scales of reality, from electrons flickering in superposition to microtubules vibrating within neurons, to thoughts emerging as subjective experience, and finally to the awareness that sits quietly observing it all. The quantum world is strange, non-intuitive, and beautiful, yet it may be intimately connected to the thing that matters most to you, the very sensation of being you. And in this calm, reflective space, with no rush, with no distraction, we can explore the subtleties, the complexities, and the elegant questions that arise when physics and consciousness converge. Take a moment to appreciate the paradox. The universe is at once vast and incomprehensibly tiny. In the same instant, the quantum scales of electrons, photons, and fields may underlie the emergent scales of human thought, memory, and imagination. Our brains, sculpted by evolution, are classical instruments, yet they may be guided by quantum undercurrents. Consciousness could, in principle, be a phenomenon that cannot be entirely understood without invoking the rules that govern the subatomic world, where uncertainty, probability, and entanglement dominate. And that is the wonder of this exploration. The very act of contemplating consciousness through the lens of quantum physics is not merely an intellectual exercise, but an invitation to recognize the majesty and mystery of our existence. Subscribe, like, and comment below. Tell us where in the country you're watching from, and join the community of curious minds exploring the subtle interplay of mind and matter. We will continue to move slowly, patiently, and thoughtfully through the next layers of this astonishing frontier, where the smallest particles may illuminate the largest questions of awareness, perception, and existence itself. As we move deeper into this quiet exploration, we shift from the broad philosophical horizon into the intricate biological terrain of the brain itself. If consciousness is in any way connected to quantum processes, then there must be a physical structure within the nervous system capable of supporting such phenomena. The brain is not an abstract cloud of thought. It is a living organ composed of cells, proteins, electrical gradients, and molecular machines. To understand whether quantum mechanics could plausibly participate in conscious experience, we must gently descend into this microscopic architecture and examine what is actually there. At first glance, the brain appears overwhelmingly classical. Neurons communicate through electrical impulses known as action potentials. These impulses are generated by the movement of charged ions, primarily sodium, potassium, calcium, and chloride, across specialized protein channels embedded in the cell membrane. The timing and pattern of these spikes encode information. Networks of billions of neurons exchange signals across trillions of synapses, forming circuits responsible for sensation, memory, decision-making, and emotion. For decades, mainstream neuroscience has explained cognition as an emergent property of this electrochemical activity. The brain in this view is a biological computer, immensely complex, adaptive, and plastic, yet governed by classical physics. And yet, within every neuron lies a deeper level of structure that invites further inquiry. Inside the cell body and extending along its axon and dendrites is a scaffolding known as the cytoskeleton. This structural network gives the cell its shape, organizes transport, and coordinates internal processes. One of the primary components of the cytoskeleton is the microtubule, a cylindrical protein polymer composed of repeating units of tubulin. Microtubules are not merely static supports. They are dynamic, constantly assembling and disassembling, guiding intracellular transport, and influencing cellular behavior. The significance of microtubules in theories of quantum consciousness arises from their geometry and molecular properties. Tubulin proteins, which form the building blocks of microtubules, exist in conformational states, subtle arrangements of electric charge and molecular orientation. Some researchers have proposed that these states could function analogously to bits in classical computing or even qubits in quantum computing. If tubulin proteins can occupy superposed states, even briefly, then microtubules might serve as sites of quantum information processing within neurons. This idea, most notably advanced in the orchestrated objective reduction theory, often abbreviated as OR, suggests that microtubules sustain quantum coherence across clusters of tubulin proteins. According to this framework, these coherent states evolve according to quantum rules until they reach a threshold determined by spacetime geometry, at which point a collapse event occurs, corresponding to a moment of conscious experience. In this model, consciousness is not continuous but composed of discrete moments, each linked to a fundamental quantum event. To appreciate the boldness of this claim, we must understand what quantum coherence entails. In quantum systems, coherence refers to the maintenance of phase relationships between components of a superposition. In simpler terms, it is what allows a particle or system to exist in multiple possible states simultaneously, preserving the mathematical relationships between those states. However, coherence is fragile. In laboratory conditions, physicists must isolate quantum systems at extremely low temperatures to prevent interactions with the environment from causing decoherence. The loss of superposition due to external disturbance. The brain, by contrast, is warm, noisy, and chemically active. At approximately 37 degrees Celsius, surrounded by molecular collisions and electromagnetic fluctuations, it seems at first implausible that delicate quantum states could survive long enough to influence cognition. Yet nature continues to surprise us. In recent decades, the field of quantum biology has uncovered evidence that certain biological processes exploit quantum effects. In photosynthesis, for instance, energy transfer within chlorophyll molecules appears to involve coherent quantum dynamics, allowing plants to achieve remarkable efficiency in capturing sunlight. Similarly, Some migratory birds are believed to navigate using quantum entanglement within specialized proteins sensitive to Earth's magnetic field. These findings demonstrate that quantum phenomena can, under specific conditions, persist in biological systems that are not isolated in pristine laboratory vacuums. The question, then, becomes whether the brain might possess microenvironments capable of sustaining coherence for meaningful durations. Proponents argue that the ordered structure of microtubules, combined with shielding effects from surrounding proteins and water molecules, could create pockets of relative stability. Furthermore, the repetitive, lattice-like arrangement of tubulin units may enable collective behavior, amplifying quantum effects across larger scales. If coherence occurs across networks of microtubules within neurons, then quantum information could influence synaptic firing patterns in subtle yet significant ways. Critics respond with caution. They point out that measured decoherence times in biological systems are typically extremely short, far shorter than the milliseconds associated with neural firing. They argue that classical processes suffice to explain cognition, and that introducing quantum mechanics risks adding unnecessary complexity without empirical support. From this perspective, consciousness is an emergent property of large-scale neural dynamics, not a phenomenon requiring subatomic intervention. Between these viewpoints lies a fertile landscape of research. Experimentalists are developing techniques to probe microtubules with increasing precision, using spectroscopy and nanoscale imaging to examine whether quantum vibrational modes exist within their structures. Some studies suggest that microtubules exhibit resonant oscillations at frequencies that may interact with electromagnetic fields in the brain. Others investigate whether anesthetics, substances known to eliminate consciousness temporarily, interact specifically with microtubule proteins, potentially hinting at their relevance to awareness. The connection to anesthesia is particularly intriguing. General anesthetics reliably suppress consciousness while leaving many basic neural functions intact. If consciousness were purely a product of classical synaptic transmission, one might expect anesthesia to act primarily at synapses. Yet some evidence suggests that anesthetic molecules bind to hydrophobic pockets within tubulin proteins, altering their dynamics. This observation does not prove quantum consciousness, but it invites deeper examination of the molecular correlates of awareness. As we reflect on these possibilities, we must maintain a balance between wonder and rigor. It is easy to be captivated by the poetic symmetry of quantum mechanics and consciousness intertwining. After all, both involve uncertainty, probability, and non-locality. Both resist simplistic explanation. Yet science advances not by poetic resonance but by reproducible evidence. The challenge for researchers is to design experiments capable of distinguishing quantum contributions from classical noise. One promising direction involves examining brain activity at extremely fine temporal resolutions. If conscious moments correspond to discrete quantum collapse events, as some theories suggest, then measurable signatures might appear in neural oscillations. Brain waves observable through electroencephalography and magnetoencephalography exhibit rhythmic patterns across various frequency bands. Could subtle irregularities within these rhythms reflect underlying quantum processes? The answer remains unknown, but the question itself drives innovation in neuroimaging technology. Beyond microtubules, other hypotheses explore quantum effects in ion channels, synaptic vesicles, and even water molecules within neural tissue. Water, often overlooked as a mere solvent, forms complex hydrogen-bonded networks that may support coherent vibrational state. Some theorists speculate that structured water layers around proteins could participate in information processing at scales bridging classical and quantum domains. While speculative, such ideas underscore the richness of the biological substrate in which consciousness arises. Stepping back, we recognize that the brain is a multiscale system. At one level, it is governed by quantum electrodynamics, the same theory describing interactions between electrons and photons. At another, it is a biochemical network shaped by evolution. At yet another, it is a cognitive system capable of language, reasoning, and self-reflection. Whether quantum mechanics plays an active role in consciousness or simply underlies it as the foundation of all matter, its presence is inescapable. Every neuron is composed of atoms. Every chemical bond depends on quantum interactions, even if consciousness emerges entirely from classical neural networks. Those networks themselves are built upon quantum rules. Thus, the intersection between quantum physics and consciousness may not require exotic new forces or mystical interpretations. It may simply reflect the continuity of physical law across scales. The same equations governing electrons in a vacuum also govern electrons in neurons. The mystery lies not in invoking quantum mechanics, but in understanding how complexity arises from simplicity, how subjective experience blossoms from physical processes. Let us consider the broader philosophical implications. If quantum processes contribute to consciousness, then awareness may be more deeply integrated with the fabric of reality than previously imagined. The observer effect in quantum mechanics, the principle that measurement influences outcomes, has sometimes been misinterpreted as requiring a conscious observer. In modern physics, measurement refers to interaction with any macroscopic system, not necessarily a mind. Yet the conceptual interplay between observation and reality invites reflection. Could consciousness, by virtue of being a physical process, participate in the unfolding of quantum events in subtle ways? Most physicists would caution against conflating interpretation with evidence. Still, the dialogue between disciplines enriches our understanding. Neuroscientists bring empirical rigor. Physicists contribute mathematical frameworks. Philosophers clarify conceptual boundaries. Together, they explore whether the phenomenon of being aware, the quiet sense of presence you experience right now, can be fully accounted for by classical computation, or whether it requires a deeper integration with quantum principles. In the stillness of contemplation, we find ourselves standing at a threshold. On one side lies established neuroscience, mapping circuits and neurotransmitters with remarkable precision. On the other lies the quantum domain, shimmering with probability and entanglement. Between them is a bridge yet to be fully constructed. Whether that bridge proves sturdy or illusory remains to be seen. But the act of constructing it, of asking how the smallest scales of reality might inform the largest questions of mind, represents one of the most ambitious intellectual endeavors of our time. As we gently conclude this chapter, allow the complexity to settle without demanding immediate resolution. The brain is an orchestra of molecules and fields. Microtubules form lattices within neurons, potentially resonating in ways we are only beginning to measure. Quantum biology demonstrates that life can, under certain conditions, harness coherence. Theories such as ORCHR propose bold connections between spacetime geometry and conscious moments. Critics remind us to demand evidence and clarity. In this quiet space of inquiry, we do not rush to choose sides. We simply acknowledge the depth of the mystery. If quantum mechanics contributes even subtly to consciousness, then every thought, every memory, every perception may be shaped by processes occurring at scales unimaginably small. And if it does not, then the classical brain alone achieves something equally astonishing, the emergence of subjective experience from intricate networks of cells. Either way, the exploration enriches our understanding of what it means to be aware. And as we prepare to continue into the next chapter, we carry with us both humility and wonder. Humility before the vastness of what remains unknown, and wonder at the possibility that within the microscopic scaffolding of our own neurons may lie clues to the deepest question of all: what is it that allows the universe to experience itself through us? Begins not with an answer, but with a quiet realization that the mystery of quantum consciousness may never resolve into a simple statement. Because the deeper we look into the fabric of reality and the inner workings of awareness, the more we discover that both are structured not like solid objects but like unfolding relationships, patterns of probability, information, and interaction. Theodore, the researcher, reminds us that the most responsible conclusion we can draw today is not that consciousness is definitively quantum, nor that it is purely classical computation, but that the question itself reveals something extraordinary about our species. We are matter that can question matter, atoms arranged in such a way that they can contemplate atoms. In laboratories across the United States, from research centers in California to neuroscience institutes in Massachusetts, from physics departments in Texas to cognitive science labs in Illinois, scientists continue to test the boundaries between decoherence and coherence, between neural firing and subjective feeling, between measurable signal and private experience. Each experiment refines the map, even if the territory remains vast and partially obscured. We now understand that quantum mechanics governs the microscopic layer of existence with astonishing precision, and we understand that brains operate through electrochemical processes shaped by biology and evolution. But the bridge between equation and experience remains one of the deepest open problems in science and philosophy. Perhaps consciousness does not sit inside quantum particles like a hidden ingredient, Perhaps instead it emerges when complexity, information integration, and dynamic systems reach certain thresholds. Or perhaps quantum indeterminacy subtly influences neural computation in ways not yet measurable. Or perhaps entirely new frameworks, still unimagined, will one day dissolve the apparent divide. What matters most is that we approach this frontier with intellectual humility. The history of science teaches us that certainty often yields to revision, and that today's speculation becomes tomorrow's refined theory or discarded path. As we end this journey, we do not close the door, we leave it gently open. The universe at its smallest scales remains probabilistic and relational, and the mind that contemplates it remains luminous and mysterious. Whether quantum mechanics ultimately explains consciousness or simply coexists with it, one fact stands clear: the exploration itself deepens our appreciation of reality. And so we rest in that awareness, the awareness that the cosmos is not silent machinery, but a dynamic unfolding in which we participate. In asking what is inside quantum consciousness, we may discover that the more powerful question is what consciousness allows the universe to become.